Clara tightened the straps of her worn satchel as the sun dipped low over the dusty frontier town. She had left behind the bustling streets of the city, the sewing machine humming day and night, for a hope of simpler work and a fresh start. The sound of horses' hooves echoed down the empty street, and her heart thumped with equal parts fear and anticipation. The frontier was unkind, she had heard, and being a seamstress with only basic cooking skills made her feel fragile in a world that demanded strength. The saloon doors creaked as she passed, the scent of whiskey and wood smoke curling around her like a warning. Villagers watched her cautiously, whispering to one another. Clara knew that being a woman alone meant vulnerability, yet she carried herself with quiet determination. Her fingers itched not for needles, but for a spoon to stir, a pan to handle, a way to prove her worth beyond delicate fabrics. Every step felt heavy, but she refused to turn back, the city behind her now a distant memory. Her first stop was the small eatery on Main Street. The owner, a stern woman with tired eyes, measured her carefully. "Can you cook?" she asked sharply. Clara nodded, her heart sinking slightly. She had learned enough from her mother to manage hearty stews and fresh bread, but she feared it wouldn't be enough for these rough frontier folk. Still, the hunger in the townspeople's eyes when they saw her hands folded politely made her resolve solidify. She would not fail. Night fell quickly, and the wind cut through the streets with a chilling bite. Clara set up her modest room above the eatery, unpacking her few belongings. Among them was a faded piece of fabric she had sewn for her mother years ago, a reminder of who she had been in the life she was leaving behind. The loneliness settled around her like a heavy blanket. Somewhere down the street, a piano played softly, its notes weaving through the town, a fragile promise of hope in the desolation. The following morning, Clara stepped outside and noticed the neighboring homestead for the first time. A rugged, broad-shouldered cowboy was repairing a fence, his movements precise and confident, dust settling on his sun-browned skin. Their eyes met briefly. He scowled, turning back to his work. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, but a curiosity she could not name. The town whispered about him, harsh, solitary, and quick-tempered. She swallowed her unease and walked toward the eatery. Work began slowly, Clara chopping vegetables and stirring pots, her hands steady despite the townsfolk's skeptical glances. The cowboy watched from his porch across the way, leaning against the railing, his gaze sharp and unreadable. Every time she carried a tray outside, their eyes met, tension simmering in the quiet space between them. Clara reminded herself she was here to work, to survive, not to chase anyone's approval. Yet, she couldn't deny a strange pull toward the enigmatic man who seemed as untamed as the land itself. A week passed with minor successes and small failures. Clara's meals were met with cautious approval, the aroma drawing a few curious neighbors. Still, the cowboy remained distant, rarely acknowledging her presence beyond a curt nod. One evening, she caught him watching her from the shadows near the barn. His expression was inscrutable, a mixture of suspicion and something softer she couldn't decipher. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken words that Clara longed to hear yet feared to confront. A sudden storm rolled in one afternoon, lightning cracking across the sky and rain pounding the rooftops. Clara rushed to secure her windows, water splashing around her feet. From the corner of her eye, she saw the cowboy struggling with a toppled cart in the downpour. Without thinking, she grabbed a sturdy rope and ran to help, her heart racing. Together, they righted the cart, soaked to the bone, and in that shared struggle, a silent understanding began to form, an unspoken acknowledgement of each other's resilience. When the rain subsided, they stood in the muddy yard, panting and dripping. For the first time, the cowboy spoke. "You didn't have to help." His voice was gruff but not unkind. Clara smiled faintly, shaking water from her sleeves. "I could say the same about you," she replied. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then quickly vanished. The moment passed, leaving only the lingering warmth of connection neither was ready to name. Clara felt something shift, a small crack in the harsh exterior of the frontier. Days turned into weeks. Clara's cooking became the talk of the town. Her hands moved deftly, preparing meals that warmed bellies and hearts alike. The cowboy began to tolerate her presence, occasionally exchanging brief words about chores or weather. Each encounter was a small victory, a step toward trust. Yet, Clara sensed a storm brewing beneath his stoic demeanor, a past heavy with sorrow or mistakes he refused to share. She wondered if her kindness could ever reach the man behind the hard eyes. One evening, a fire broke out in the barn next door. Clara screamed, alerting the town. The cowboy fought the flames fiercely, smoke curling around him, embers dancing in the night. Clara joined, fetching buckets and passing them to him without hesitation. The townsfolk watched, impressed by her bravery. Together, they saved the barn, drenched and exhausted. The cowboy looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, his gaze softened. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that life on the frontier was easier when shared. As they cleaned up the aftermath, the cowboy finally spoke more openly. Not many would have come running into that fire, he admitted, a hint of vulnerability threading through his gruff tone. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, the realization that courage and compassion were beginning to bridge the gap between them. The frontier was harsh, yes, but moments like these made it bearable. Clara understood that trust was built in shared hardships, in the willingness to risk for others, even strangers. Nightfall brought a calm after the chaos, stars twinkling like scattered gems across the inky sky. Clara returned to her room, exhausted but elated. The memory of their teamwork lingered, her heart beating faster than usual. She realized that this rugged cowboy, once distant and formidable, had begun to occupy a space in her thoughts she hadn't expected. The frontier was teaching her resilience, courage, and perhaps, the beginnings of a connection that neither of them could deny. By the end of the week, Clara noticed subtle changes. The cowboy left small gifts at her door, a basket of fresh herbs, a loaf of bread. She smiled each time, heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The town watched these small exchanges with curiosity and quiet amusement. Clara understood the frontier had tested her in ways she never imagined, but she was growing stronger, more confident. Little did she know, a bigger challenge awaited, one that would test not just her courage but her heart. The following morning, Clara awoke to a quiet that felt almost too peaceful. Her room smelled faintly of fresh bread and herbs, small reminders of the cowboy's silent gestures. She poured herself a cup of tea, thinking about the subtle shift in their dynamic. Trust was growing, fragile but real. Clara realized that the frontier, with all its challenges, was teaching her resilience, patience, and a strange new sense of belonging. The man next door, once distant, had become an unexpected anchor in her life. But the calm didn't last long. A traveling merchant arrived, claiming the town owed him a debt. Rumors spread quickly, whispers of danger reaching every doorstep. Clara watched from the window as townspeople gathered, tension thick in the air. The cowboy moved like a storm, fists ready, eyes narrowed. Clara's heart raced. She had never seen him so alive with purpose. The threat was external, yet it felt personal, an invisible test of courage for both of them. When night fell, the merchant confronted the cowboy at the edge of the town. Clara, fearful but determined, followed silently, staying behind crates and barrels. She saw the cowboy stand his ground, unwavering and fierce. Words were exchanged, threats flung like lightning across the tense night. Clara's pulse pounded. She realized that the man she had grown to admire and trust was more than just rugged strength. He carried the weight of honor, pride, and perhaps heartbreak she couldn't yet understand. Suddenly, a scuffle erupted. Clara acted instinctively, grabbing a lantern to help illuminate the darkness. She tripped and fell, scraping her arm, but her resolve didn't waver. The cowboy glanced back, eyes widening for a fraction of a second, then returned to defend the town. Their teamwork, even in chaos, was seamless. Clara understood that the frontier had no room for hesitation. Courage demanded action, sometimes reckless, always brave. By dawn, the merchant was gone, chased out by the combined effort of the town and the cowboy's unmatched skill. Clara's arm throbbed, but relief flooded her veins. She saw the cowboy wipe sweat and soot from his brow, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That moment, quiet but profound, marked a shift. For the first time, they were not just neighbors, they were allies, partners in the unpredictable dance of frontier life. Over the next few days, Clara noticed subtle changes. The cowboy offered her small gestures of care, wood for her stove, a basket of vegetables, even helping carry heavy flour sacks. Words were few, but the meaning clear. Clara's heart warmed with each act. She realized that love often began not with grand declarations, but through simple, consistent acts of kindness. Trust had evolved into affection, silent yet undeniable. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, the cowboy invited Clara to sit by the fence. He spoke softly, the first time his voice carried more than practicality or warning. "You've changed this town, in ways you don't even see," he said. Clara felt her chest tighten. She had feared the frontier, feared failure, yet here she was, recognized for her courage and compassion. She smiled, a mix of pride and nervous anticipation, sensing that something profound was blossoming between them. A sudden letter arrived from the city, news of a family emergency. Clara's old life beckoned, offering comfort and familiarity. She wrestled with the decision: go back to security or stay in this wild, unpredictable frontier with the man who had slowly become her world. The cowboy watched quietly, reading her hesitation. He didn't pressure, only offered a steady presence. Clara realized that love here meant choice, freedom, and trust, not chains or obligation. The night before she was to leave, Clara walked to the barn one last time. She saw the cowboy tending to the horses, silhouetted against the flickering lanterns. Their eyes met, and unspoken words flowed between them. She reached out, and he didn't hesitate to take her hand. In that simple touch, years of solitude and fear melted away. Both understood that the bond they had formed was not fleeting, it was built on courage, respect, and shared hardships. The next morning, Clara packed her bag but paused at the door. The cowboy appeared, holding a small, hand-sewn pouch, a gift of herbs and spices for her journey. "For cooking, wherever you go," he said, a rare softness in his tone. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, touched by the thoughtfulness and effort behind the simple gift. The frontier had hardened him, but moments like this revealed the man beneath the tough exterior, capable of tenderness and care. As she prepared to leave, the cowboy stopped her. "The frontier isn't the same without you," he admitted, voice low but steady. Clara's heart skipped. She realized that leaving wasn't just a choice between places, it was a choice of hearts. She smiled, and in that instant, the decision became clear. Home was no longer a city street or a distant past. It was here, in the frontier, alongside the man who had taught her courage and shown her love. Clara set her bag down, shaking her head with laughter and relief. The townspeople watched, smiling at the unusual pair. Whispers filled the streets, but Clara didn't care. Her heart was full, and for the first time since arriving, she felt truly safe and cherished. The frontier, harsh as it was, had given her something priceless. A home, a purpose, and the beginnings of love she had never expected. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Clara and the cowboy deepened. She cooked, tended to the small eatery, and shared laughter and stories with him. The town grew to respect and admire their partnership. Life was still rugged and unpredictable, but together they faced every challenge. The cowboy's gruff exterior softened, revealing the warmth, loyalty, and humor hidden beneath. Clara's heart thrived in this world of dust, sun, and shared dreams. On a golden afternoon, as the wind carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh bread, the cowboy finally spoke words Clara had longed to hear. "Stay, not as a neighbor, but as mine." Clara laughed, tears sparkling, and nodded. Their hands intertwined, the frontier stretching endlessly around them, filled with promise and new beginnings. Love had found them, unexpected but true. And in that rugged, sun-drenched land, Clara discovered a home, a partner, and a happiness she had never imagined possible.